Welcome into the State Line Fast Break Podcast. I'm your host, Kasey Boone, and this is yet another edition of the ISO where I'm going to dive into the recent 9-game winning streak of the San Antonio Spurs, followed up by a little international basketball talk as the 2028 Olympics is fast approaching. So to begin, we are going to dive into this recent Spurs-Detroit Pistons game that took place on Monday night, where the Spurs picked up a 114-103 win on the road at Detroit in a battle of the Eastern Conference number 1 versus the Western Conference number 2. Two top 3 teams in the league record-wise up to this point, where this was a playoff basketball game through and through. It was physical from the very start. The Pistons set that tone, and the Spurs countered it throughout the entire night. I thought they matched their energy right away, and they did not seem to be backed down by the level of physicality and energy and effort that the Pistons team plays with and that they have overwhelmed many teams throughout the year with. That was probably the most impressive performance of this win, just because the Spurs, obviously we've talked about on this podcast, they're a young team. How are they going to respond to adversity? How are they going to respond to these type of atmospheres where games get a little tighter? The margin for error really shrinks, and everybody from 1 through 15 on the bench has to be on their A game in whatever their role is for that game. I thought the Spurs did that incredibly well on Monday night, picking up yet another double-digit win in this 9-game win streak, where the only non-double-digit win was the first win of this this win streak, where they were on a road trip to Charlotte, lost to a team that at that point had gone on to win 9 straight. Had some travel issues. That game got moved up. That was so many weird circumstances surrounding that game. They get in the day of game 1 of this 9-game win streak, where they played the Orlando Magic and found a way to pull through with a win there by 9 points. And ever since then, the rest of these 8 wins have come by 10 or more points. Most recently against the league's best record team in the Detroit Pistons. The story of this game was really pure dominance by Victor Wembanyama and Stephon Castle on the defensive end. They had Cade Cunningham just in shambles for most of the game, offensively just confused. 5 of 26 shooting, 2 of 9 from the three-point line. It's only 16 points for Cade Cunningham. This is a guy who is well within the MVP talks, especially at this point in the year with just where the record is with their team. You got injuries to Jokic and Shea that have put kind of their status in lingo. Jokic has not looked very good coming off of his injury, even though obviously the stats remain the same, but that's what you expect from a guy like Nikola Jokic. So Cade in this game, from the very start, was just flustered. Castle was on him from the very start, picking him up 94 feet. This was probably the most frustrated Cade that I have seen in a game up to this point. There was a moment where Castle's picking him up 94 feet. They make it into the far corner, and Cade just flat out pushes him over onto the ground, stands over top of him, gets an offensive foul. This leads Keldon Johnson to come in and kind of push his way back. Jalen Duren steps in to protect Cade Cunningham, and that offsetting technicals on Keldon and Duren during this little scuffle here. But that just showed just the level of intensity and effort that Castle guarded with the entire night. He should be an all-defensive caliber player. In my mind, he is an all-defensive caliber player. But Victor Wembanyama, he had 6 blocks in this game, but it felt like he could have had about 15. The impact that he had around the rim, with most shot blockers, it's like you get within the restricted area and then you get a little tense. Well, his range really extended out almost to the free throw line in terms of just deterring guys' shots, making them second guess their efforts in driving to the rim. They had to settle for a lot of tough, difficult, high arcing shots when they got into that range, which you could see the impact because most of those shots end up coming short off the front of the rim. And it was just a master class, and it's why if he reaches the 65-game rule, which knock on wood, hopefully he does, he should be, if not unanimous, there should not be many guys that do not vote Victor Wembanyama Defensive Player of the Year. Rudy Gobert, who I said on last podcast with Josh, I thought has had a tremendous defensive season, and he's getting a lot of buzz. But that game last night against the league's best record just proves why Wemby is the defensive player of the year, should have been the defensive player of the year last year had he not had the issues with the blood clot. Probably should have won in his rookie year. That award went to Rudy Gobert that year. But this was everything you wanted to see out of a young Spurs ball club. They answer the bell. The biggest question when you go on the road in environments like this is how do the supporting role guys fare in an event like this? The Spurs did not have that problem because their best scorer, really their two best scorers, were Devin Vassell and Julian Champagnie, who combined for 12 threes. Devin had 7 on his own, which matched the entire Pistons roster. That was just incredibly uplifting for this roster, who had that guy who in any moment was able to deliver with a big shot. It was huge in this game, and it's huge for the outlook of what this team can be, because when you look at the Spurs, and I said it last podcast, I just feel like the youth and the inexperience is going to come back at some point. But they just play so fearless, and they have guys typically in those roles that would kind of shrink in certain moments. They certainly do not do that. De'Aaron Fox and Victor Wembanyama were combined 10 for 33 on the night, which is just an abysmal shooting day for them. But Julian Champagnie, 5 of 8 from 3. Devin Vassell, 7 of 11 from 3. They have guys who are surrounding their 2 stars, 3 stars really with Castle, who are not afraid of these big moments, who are not afraid to take big jump shots. There was a 3 in the right corner in front of the Pistons bench. Julian Champagnie shot late in the game, which proved to be a massive shot, where just laced it, and he turned around. It looked like one of the assistant coaches for Detroit said something to him in the backswing of his shot there, and he let him know. He let him have it. There was a transition 3. Castle had a great defensive play, kicked it up, kind of sprint into that left corner, swing, knocks down a 3 there, turns, and has a little something for the fans sitting on the baseline. These are guys, they are not afraid of the moment. They've got swagger, they've got confidence, and something that maybe a Spurs team in the past wouldn't have, but they have this. They're not afraid to jaw back and forth with you. They're not afraid to get in your face and kind of let you know what they're thinking. Keldon Johnson, I thought, set the tone early. Him and Castle with that interaction with Cade. And the energy and infectious intensity that Wemby brings to a roster, and you see him interact the same way with the French national team as you do with the San Antonio Spurs. It's one of the unique things about foreign players, because they don't come in with all like the media hype and the we're going to complain for foul calls, and and he mentioned this early in the year after a win against OKC, where it's this ethical basketball mindset, and I thought he really in this game displayed that well. They were knocking the crap out of him the entire game. They put him on the hardwood many times, and you didn't see Victor at any point really go to the refs, and he didn't let it affect him in a way to where it threw him off his game. Even though he had a bad shooting night, he still ended up with 21-17 and 6 blocks in this game. The physicality never affected him. He kept playing through it, kept finding his spots. He ended up going on a scoring wave. The fourth quarter that Victor Wembanyama had in this game was just mind-boggling. He had 11.6 rebounds, 3 assists, 4 blocks on 83% true shooting. He took over the game in the fourth when he needed to close it, and he needed 10 points going into the fourth. He had 11 in the fourth alone. He got better as the game went on, as he got adjusted to the physicality, and we all knew that this was going to be a playoff-type atmosphere going into this game. The Spurs got out to a very hot start, up 14-2, and then the Pistons kind of settled in. Like Spurs had that youthful energy where they're like, all right, we're taking this serious. We're coming out the gates just hellfire. They did that, and they went on a massive run. A lot of energy early. Obviously, the Pistons, we knew would weather that, and they did, eventually snagging the lead. But it even that run by the Pistons, it never affected this young Spurs team, and that was the most impressive part. Is they took haymakers throughout the course of this game. Detroit's not afraid to throw their body around. They're not afraid to get physical. They're not afraid to let you have it if you don't rise up and step up to the moment. And I thought really just all the guys on this roster, even Carter Bryant and Dylan Harper, when they came in the game, these two rookies were not afraid of the moment. They both guarded Cade in instances where Castle or Fox was not on. Cade Cunningham. And Carter only played 4 minutes, but he made a three, had 2 rebounds, had an assist, had a block. So he filled up the stat sheet in an important 4 minutes for this roster. No moment is too big for this young Spurs team, which is why you saw a lot of the media outbreak today saying, yeah, the Spurs, they can go win a championship, and they can win a championship as early as this year. And now we've rarely seen a team of their stature, their youthful energy, ever win a title in the first year they've ever made the playoffs. Now I think people are comparing them a little bit to the Boston Celtics in 2008, to where they had a losing record and then sprung on and won a championship, but they added, Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen to the Paul Pierce dynamic of that team. They already had Rajon Rondo, and so they added these star-level pieces to this roster, which you can kind of compare that to adding De'Aaron Fox and adding Luke Cornett and adding a guy like Harrison Barnes. Now, Harrison Barnes was added before last season, and Fox they added at the deadline, but the Spurs only got 5 games out of the Wemby-Fox combo last year before the unfortunate blood clot scenario with Victor Wembanyama. And so this year was really the first year we've gotten to see that combination, along with the young guys that they've added, and adding 2 rookies that are actually playing meaningful minutes for a team that's expected to make a run in April and June. And so here's the outlook for the Spurs team. They can win a championship. There's no doubt about it. This is the blueprint. This game is the blueprint of how you win. They are going to have to be physical. They are going to have to be the aggressors. Their best players cannot be afraid of the moment. Steph Castle cannot be afraid to go out and guard the Steph Currys of the world, the Luka Doncic's, the Shai Gilgeous-Alexanders, the Jamal Murrays, the players that he's going to have to guard in the Western Conference. He's going to have to guard Anthony Edwards potentially. These are prolific scorers and prolific offensive players in the game. He can't be afraid of those moments. Victor has to set the tone and the intensity. There is no moment too big for Wembanyama, and there's a famous phrase, never put a ceiling on a Victor Wembanyama-led team. He almost pulled up, and I'm going to get into international basketball here in a little bit, but he almost pulled off the upset on Team USA in the Paris Olympics in the gold medal game until Steph Curry, one of the greatest scorers in the history of the league, just went on a tangent of threes and ridiculous circus shots. And Curry proved why he's arguably a top 15 to 20 player in the history of the game of basketball. But Wemby was the best player for 3/4 of that game. And he's been in these moments. Steph Castle has won a title at UConn as a collegiate athlete. They've had guys that have been in big moments now. They haven't played in the NBA playoffs, and that's where there's a lot of hesitancy. But this was the game that I needed to give me confidence in what this team could be and the outlook of this team moving forward. And I think that given these circumstances, the Spurs can be legit contenders. They've still have to finish out this rodeo road trip, as they've got Toronto coming up on Wednesday. They've got Brooklyn on Thursday. They've got New York to start off the month of March. And look, they're 9-0 currently in the month of February. It's totally realistic that they can get 11-0 before the month ends, and then they reset their clock, and we got to go win in March. And they're going to have tough games. They've still got to play New York. They've got to play Philadelphia. They got Detroit again just next week. Clippers coming up. Rockets. They've still got to play the Denver Nuggets 3 times. So the pecking order in the West is not set in stone, but they are pretty comfortably setting themselves up to where they've got a much easier path the rest of the year when you look at the totality of their schedule compared to the Oklahoma City Thunder. So that 1 seed in the West is not completely out of reach for this team. And they've got the mentality and they've got the dudes on this roster that where I could totally see them going out and getting it. And it really depends on how long SGA and J-Dub is going to continue to be out for the Thunder. And they've got some big games coming up here to where you could look by the end of this week and this 2.5 game separation might suddenly be even tighter than that. So look, there's a lot to play for the San Antonio Spurs ball club. And this was the game for me, and I had said it, that I put them in the soft contender list. I still have questions about the playoff, but this is the type of game that gives me full confidence going into the playoffs that these guys can compete and beat any ball club that they go up against. They're not afraid. They won't back down. I think it's going to be incredibly difficult for any team to beat Victor Wembanyama 4 straight times. The dude does not give up. There's not a lot that you can do that's going to hold him down for an entire game, much less 4 games throughout a 7-game series. And they just have too many competitors on this roster, and I think, and I'm going to give Mitch Johnson his flowers here. That dude is a competitor, and for a young team to come out in these big games and play the way that they do, that's all credit to Mitch Johnson. Whatever he says to them, whatever his message, whatever the tone is, they clearly and obviously respect whatever he is trying to preach and get through to this roster. And one thing I love to watch during the games is just the reaction from the bench, because he's a young dude, and they got Sean Sweeney as their associate head coach, who is a rock star who will be a head coach in this league before we know it. But Sean Sweeney is as animated as it get. He runs the defense. There was a sequence where Wemby swatted Cade off the backboard, ball kind of batted around. Detroit was able to retrieve it. They tried to throw it down to Duren. He lost it out of bounds. Spurs ball, massive play in the game. Sean Sweeney just with the most violent arm swing, celebration, fist pump that you'll see from a coach in an NBA game. During that same sequence, Mitch Johnson was kind of squatted down in an animated position, just clapping, just encouraging his guys. You got to keep going. Keep pouring it on. This is the intensity, even late in the game when you got a 10-point lead. It's those type of efforts that's going to lead the Spurs team to win multiple playoff series, potentially make a run at the NBA Finals. And so I think that's why you see Mitch interact the way he does with the players on the roster. I think that's why you see the effort that the players give, is because they have the ultimate respect for their head coach and the staff in general. And they take on the support players are going to take on the attitude of your best player and your head coach. And those two are insanely competitive. They're warriors in every sense, and they hate to lose. You saw that with Wemby in the All-Star game. He takes everything insanely serious. I mean, you just got a bunch of competitors and guys that respect the game. They respect the opponent, and that's why I think they love the challenge of these big games. And that was no different on the road in Detroit, where they could have easily laid down when Detroit went on that run and not given the level of effort that they needed in order to win that basketball game. But they never gave up. They kept fighting. Even when Cade kind of made a couple shots there, Duren kept getting some offensive boards. They just continued to win at him. Wemby's not afraid to get dunked on, because he knows for every time he gets dunked on, he's going to have 6 or 7 blocks in that same game, which he did on Monday night. It's a joy to watch, and the outlook of this team is the ceiling is limitless. You don't put a ceiling on Victor Wembanyama, and I'm looking forward to the challenge Wednesday in Toronto. Toronto's going to be coming off a game against Oklahoma City, which is taking place tonight, which I am fascinated and going to try to watch as much as I can. You got a couple big games with the Knicks and Cavs as well taking place on Peacock. Just the outlook for the NBA schedule the rest of the way. There is a ton of good basketball. And I want to take a look just real quick at the Western Conference. The Rockets, Nuggets, Lakers, Wolves, all within a game of each other between 3rd and 6th place in the Western Conference. It is going to be a dogfight between those teams. And if you look at the record, Rockets 6-4 over the last 10, Nuggets 4-6, Lakers and Timberwolves also both 6-4. These teams are just in the mud of the season. They can't really. None of them are getting a rhythm and finding their stride. Obviously, injuries affecting the Nuggets specifically. But the Wolves are one of the most inconsistent basketball teams you'll see, but their ceiling is as high as anyone in the league if Anthony Edwards is playing the level of basketball that Anthony Edwards can play. The Rockets offensively, it's incredibly concerning. And them, like the Pistons, when they get in those rock fights with teams like the Spurs, who just have so many advantage creators who handle the ball. It's what I talked with about Josh on the podcast Sunday. I worry about Detroit and their ability to be true contenders because that showed against the Spurs Monday night. They don't have that true secondary scorer, and obviously we disagreed a little bit on the potential ceiling of Detroit, but that showed significantly Monday night. And it's the same thing with the Rockets. Where do they go if Kevin Durant is not leading them there, if Şengün is not on? They don't have that. They don't really have a true point guard, and there's going to be Ben Thompson's going to be hard to play, especially if he's not connecting on that mid-range shot or getting it. They can't get out in transition. He's going to have a hard time in the playoffs. I don't see that team as a legit title contending team. The Nuggets just got to get healthy. It's still it's a mind-blowing loss that they had to the Warriors without Steph Curry. I mean, just lapses. They can't guard anyone. They have an inability to defend even just the most beat-up Warriors team that you can find. And Wednesday night, they're going to struggle big time against the Boston Celtics. That's going to be a huge game for them. They've got to find a way to get right because the stretch they've got up with Boston, Oklahoma City, Timberwolves, back-to-back-to-back, they might find themselves slipping down into almost play-in territory depending on what happens with the Suns. Now, the Suns are going to be without Dillon Brooks for 4 to 6 weeks. That team is certainly looking a little bit more dreadful now after such a good start to the year for them. But, I mean, even them being in the position they are now is incredibly surprising considering where they were suspected to be at the start of the year. But it's a log jam in the Western Conference, and it's going to be one of the more fascinating finishes to a season I think we've seen in recent memory, which makes the season all that more exciting. And I already think it's the competitive basketball that we're getting night to night in the NBA, I think is really good this year. And obviously the highlight and what some fans are going to see is some of the tanking numbers and teams losing intentionally. But again, that just speaks to the volume and the level that this draft class is. I love just the top of this draft. There's so many talented players, and I hope Atlanta falls short in the play-in once again, gives the Spurs a chance to get up in the lottery. And I don't expect them to get up into the top 4 again, but just having a top 14 pick in this draft will be incredibly valuable to continue to build out a roster and continue to add to a championship-level team. Which, if you're a championship-level team, you have to continue to draft well later in the draft. But when you get these chances to get high-end talent on your roster, you have to hit on them, or you just won't progress from where you already are. One interesting stat I wanted to point out about the Spurs before we kind of move on to some international basketball. They are 17-0 when they shoot 40% or better from beyond the arc. And we saw that with the way Champagny and Vassell, which is why I said they are the keys to a playoff run. Your surrounding talent beyond your stars is what's going to carry you through the playoffs. And these guys haven't seen it either, which is why you're concerned about your stars not seeing it, but your role guys are just as important in stepping up in those big moments as your star players are. So when we shoot the ball well, when Champagny and Vassell and Harper and Carter Bryant and just Keldon Johnson, when these guys are hitting shots from the outside, that's what really raises the ceiling of this team. 27-5 when their three-point shooting is 35% or better, and they're 14-11 in games below 35%. So you can just see the impact that shooting makes on this ball club. Another thing I wanted to point out about Steph Castle's all defensive status. In games where he is the primary defender in shots that these players have taken. Against Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Shai is 6 of 19 with 2 turnovers. Luka is 8 of 21, 3 turnovers. Cade, 2 of 10 last night, 2 turnovers, 1 block from Castle. Devin Booker's 2 of 9, 2 turnovers. J-Dub, 3 of 10, 3 turnovers. Şengün, 1 of 5, 1 turnover. Flag, 5 of 12, 3 turnovers. Amen Thompson, 3 of 8, 1 turnover. MPJ, 2 of 7. The dude is a lightning rod defender. There's nobody like him on the roster. And he just, everybody talks about Wemby's defensive impact, which there's no doubt about it, just the shot deterrent. But on the perimeter, having a guy that can get into these guards and funnel them into a big like Wemby, it's game changing. And there's no other team in the league that really has that element. I mean, as good as rim protectors Gobert is, he doesn't have that all defensive caliber guard out there, just making it insanely difficult for these guys to penetrate and get towards the rim. And when they do, good luck. And we saw that out of the Spurs last night. So, incredible win from the Spurs. They've won 9 in a row. As I just mentioned, their 2 games in Austin were very much a success against Phoenix. That was one they needed to get specifically just because they had kind of struggled against Phoenix earlier in the year. Obviously, at that point, when they played those 2 games against Phoenix, they didn't have a full collection of the roster. There was guys in and out, beat up. A relatively healthy Phoenix team at that time. But it was good to get that win, and then Sacramento, they just blew open the water. Fox got a little bit of revenge versus an old team, so it was good to have those 2 games in Austin as well to compound with Detroit after the All-Star break, and now you've got a trip to Toronto, which I'm looking forward to on Wednesday night. Now, I want to get into a little bit about the outlook for the 2028 Olympics, because I went back and watched a little bit of the documentary surrounding the 2024 Paris Olympics and that win. For the Avengers Team USA team is what they refer to that collection of talent as. And that talent is not going to be there for them in 2028. Now, Durant came out and said just yesterday that he was wanting to still participate in 2028 if his body and his level of performance still matched the quality that it takes to be an Olympian at that time. So that's very interesting to hear. We still haven't heard an official word if Steph Curry is going to be participating at that time, but LeBron obviously is not expected to be there. And the Americans are going to be tested big time because the quality of talent around the world, and we see it, the top 5 MVP candidates going to every single year, none of which are foreign, or none of which are American. They're all foreign-born players. Jokic from Serbia, whose Serbia's team is going to be really good again, assuming Jokic is out there and healthy and playing. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a Canadian, and that team gets better and better every year with more and more influx of NBA talent. You got Luka Doncic from Slovenia, who, again, is one of the best players in the world, and if he gets hot in a one-game elimination scenario, can carry his team through the Olympics without any problem, really. And you look at Wemby, obviously, with the French national team. That's arguably the biggest threat to the Americans, and they were silver medalists in Paris, and I think they're going to be the front runner to be at least silver again going into this year. But when you kind of look at the American roster and what they're kind of looking at, Booker is expected to be back. He was actually very pivotal in their gold medal race last year as a defender, which if you watch the NBA, you don't really peg Devin Booker as a defender, but he was great defensively, really bought into a role, which is the key for the Olympics and the Americans, because the rest of these teams, they have one, maybe two star level talents, but everybody else is used to playing a secondary role. And most of these guys have played together for many, many years, growing up together, playing on their national teams at the U17 or U18 events. So they've got continuity, and they don't just have 3 weeks to practice together like you see the American team often have. There's a lot more synergy already naturally built into those rosters, which has helped to tighten the gap between the Americans and some of those teams. When you look at the American team, it's a lot of guys that are used to being the best player on their roster. They don't understand adapting and buying into a role that maybe is not necessarily best fit for their skills and best fit to what they think that they do personally, but it's best for the American team that they buy into these roles given the talent that they have spread amongst the roster. Not everybody's going to be the primary scorer for the team, which is why Booker, who probably was not the most talented guy on that American roster, played more than some other guys with more talent, because he bought into, hey, I'm going to be the guy that's going to be a pesky defender. I'm going to have to go and do some of the dirty work. I'm going to just have to play off ball and be a spot up shooter and make timely plays. The ball's not going to be in my hand 24/7 with LeBron and Curry and Durant, some of these other guys out there. Durant even came off the bench for Team USA in multiple instances. And so that's the challenge that the Americans are facing. And who knows the roster that they're going to be able to put together. They're obviously going to have plenty of talent. Cooper Flagg is up and coming. What are they going to do with like some of the guys that are coming out in draft this year? Halliburton will probably be back. Bam will probably be back. Jason Tatum will probably be back. Do they invite a guy like Donovan Mitchell? Does Jaylen Brown finally get the nod to be an American in the Olympics? There's going to be a lot of candidates for this USA roster, and it's going to be incredibly intriguing to see how they build a roster. Do they have a similar mindset of this year, putting together as much talent as they can and running that roster out there and seeing how well they perform, or do they try to put a team that mixes in well together, where they take maybe lesser talent? Maybe they take a Con Knipple over a Donovan Mitchell because they want a guy that spaces the floor and just plays a role versus someone who's going to be more ball dominant and dependent for his success. And so I'm incredibly fascinated to see how the Americans put together a roster, because when you look at the French national team, they're obviously going to have Wemby. Gobert will likely be back. I mean, that one's still probably up in the air, but it seems like he'll be back. I'm a big fan of Bilal Coulibaly, who played on that silver medalist team last year, who was in the same draft class as Wemby, who went 7th in that class. He had a very impactful Olympic run for them, and he's only gotten better in the NBA, so you can only assume he's going to get better. In international play, Alex Sarr, who was a former number 2 pick from the Washington Wizards, is going to probably be on this France team. We'll see if they invite Zachary Richache, who was the number 1 pick in that draft. Trey Ori, who was a guard taken in the first round by Brooklyn last year. Tijan Salon, another guy drafted top 10 in the draft in 2024 by the Charlotte Hornets. Noah Essengay, Pacome Datier, who was playing for the New York Knicks. Sida Sissoko, who was a member of the Spurs a few years ago, is now actually playing very good basketball for the Portland Trailblazers. So there is just a influx of talent when you look across this France roster. And obviously, I'm projecting at 2028 that the French are going to have the best player in the world on their team. And so in that instance, they're going to have a puncher's chance. And so the Americans need to go out and put together the best roster they can that they view gives them the best chance to win gold. Maybe not the most talented, stacked roster we look like, oh my God, look at the talent that we've got on this. But this roster, when we built it together, this roster is a gold medalist winning team. And that's what the USA has to do. Grant Hill has a lot of work on his hands leading up to 2028, and it starts with the World Cup again. They get some guys some experience in international play. learn how their skills translate. So that helps you put together a medal winning team come in the Olympics. Kind of dive into some other teams. You're going to have Serbia, as we mentioned, who's going to have Nikola Jokic. At that time, we would assume Nikola Topic, who's point guard selected by the Thunder just a year ago, who's been battling with some health-related stuff, but he's back out there playing a role for the Oklahoma City Thunder, who projects to be a very good international player. Nikola Jovic, another guy that plays a big role for the Miami Heat. There's just a load of talent across many of these teams, and I haven't even dove into the Canadian team, who obviously is going to have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's a MVP, who's a Finals MVP, who's a champion. Jamal Murray, champion as well. Zach Edey is a Canadian board player, another big that can kind of challenge some of the bigs that we just mentioned on these other teams. Will Shaedon Sharpe play for the Canadians? Ben Mathurin. There's a lot of talent on the Canadian roster when you look across the league as well. Obviously, RJ Barrett, his father, is one of the people that run the Canadian organization, and so he would likely be back on the roster as well. But there's the Canadians lack no NBA talent, just like the Americans and just like the French national team. So they will be big players as well. And you can never count out teams like Germany or Australia. They always have very well put together teams. Spain as well. And so as we kind of get closer, I just love looking at some of these international prospects and tournaments, because just the basketball, I think, is played at a highly sophisticated level, which you don't see in some of the American tournaments. And there's been this recent conversation about, Durant brought it up, and how he felt insulted by the way people talk about AAU basketball, which I am not going to defend the AAU circuit, because I think and his point was that the development of the American players does not reach the development that international basketball develops their players, which, look, the talent-wise, there's a big disparity. I think there's no doubt that the United States has more talent than some of these other international ball clubs. But the way players are brought up in the foreign system is much more sophisticated, and I think it does prepare them better. These players aren't more talented, but they do prepare themselves in a more sophisticated way, in a more cognitive way that understands, like, this is what our guys need to do to develop traits and skills that not only perform well for our country, but allows our players to go and chase dreams and play in the NBA. Because you see some of the guys that play in the NBA from foreign countries are not the most talented players in the world, but they are so skilled and so technical and so detail-oriented that you just don't see from a lot of these young American players. They come up through a lot of corrupted AAU systems. And so I do think there needs to be a reform and take away some of the pageantry that goes on within some of these AAU circuits and focus more on the development of the skills and the intangibles of these players. There's Durant, I don't see the argument here, because I don't think anybody's arguing that the talent-wise, American players are not faulted talent-wise, or even they're not being developed. Their players are being developed, and they're turning into great players because they are getting, they do have the necessary tools and resources to go and improve their game and get to the level that they wish to get to. But there's no doubt, you just look at it, the technical skills that these international players come into the league with is just a little bit higher. But once the talent matches the skill after some years of development in college and the pros, that's where you see the American players really take that leap and turn into star players. But it's just another thing that I think is very intriguing to look at. And international basketball never fails to disappoint. And I don't see this Olympics being any different. I look forward to the battles that Wemby is going to have with several of these different countries. And obviously, I'm an American. I'm going to root for our American team. But I will be pulling heavily for Wemby in every game that he plays in, because I'm a fan of Wemby, just like I was a fan of Manu Ginobili, and obviously I was just born around the time that Ginobili won his gold medal, but I am very proud as a Spurs fan to say, yeah, Manu Ginobili, NBA champion, Olympic gold medalist. I'm proud of him as a player and proud of him as a fan of his game. So if Wemby was to achieve that goal, I would be very satisfied with the outcome and thrilled for him as a player. But obviously, my allegiance is with the Americans and the USA team, but I am concerned about the roster that we may potentially put together against some of these other well-oiled machines who are just, and Wemby's flat out said it, he's going to play in the World Cup. And if the Americans are going to put together an Olympic roster where a majority of the talent is not playing in these World Cup events, that's concerning because these other teams are playing together. They're getting experience in international basketball together. The rules are a little bit different than the NBA. Players have to play in that to have that experience and to go out and perform at the level that they need to. And so that is concerning to me, and I just wanted to kind of highlight that. International basketball is something that I revere a lot, and I hope that we get some more clarity on kind of the outlook of the 2028 U.S. Men's Olympic basketball team, because the world is catching up quickly, and if we're not careful, we're going to lose the stake claims to the Olympic gold medal in that event, and I don't think any American-born person wants to see that happen. So this was a very fun recap to do. Obviously, the Spurs are in a very good spot, and that's what I mentioned last time on the ISO, where is going to be a heavy topic of conversation. We're going to dive into all things Spurs, where they stand at the time of these recordings, and then we're going to dive into some other topics. This time I wanted to spend a good deal of time talking about the Spurs and where they were at, and then I really only had one other topic that has been pressing on my mind, which has been international basketball, so I want to dive into that a little bit. Again, please continue to let me know how y'all feel about the ISO. Let me and Josh know about our normal episodes of the State Line Fast Break podcast. Any feedback that you have for us. These episodes are a blast to record, so I'm going to continue to do this. I love to talk about basketball. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people that aren't as passionate about it, so getting on here and just being able to express my thoughts on the game is something that I value, and I hope that y'all get something out of these discussions. If not, and you just listen because it's me and you want to support me, then that's awesome too. But it's something that I'm passionate about, and I love to share my thoughts on it. So again, you can find us anywhere you get your podcast: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. You can check us out on all the socials: Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. You can find us on all of those platforms. This has been incredibly fun. Look for another edition of the ISO either later this week or maybe early next week. It's kind of a weird schedule for the Spurs here, having that weird back-to-back and then not playing really another meaningful game until the weekend. So it might be Monday or Tuesday again before I get another one of these out. But after that game last night, there's no doubt I had to get on here and talk about the Spurs and Pistons. But again, thank you all for listening. Please share your feedback however you can reach us. This has been yet another edition of the ISO on the State Line Fast Break podcast, and we thank you for listening.